Hi, I'm Shanalika. I watched Good Omens 2 recently and my brain had a field day with it. This video is the result. First published in 1990, Good Omens is a comedic fantasy novel co-written by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. The plot centers around the coming of Armageddon, in which the Antichrist, installed by Hell among humans as a kind of changeling baby, is to lead the forces of Hell against the forces of Heaven, obliterating the world in the process. However, the demon Crowley, the one who tempted the humans on Earth, and the angel Aziraphale, the one who offered the humans a sword as they were leaving, now quite enjoy living on Earth and would rather it wasn't destroyed. So they join forces to influence the Antichrist's upbringing and thwart the plans of both heaven and hell. It's a fantastic premise, but, in my opinion, not a fantastic book. Sorry, I know it's popular and people are gonna be mad. I found it weighed down with dull characters and long-winded subplots and Gaiman's vaguely sexist, outdated humour to the point of feeling like a slog to read. In this respect, it's probably one of my least favourite Terry Pratchett books, and Neil Gaiman I've actually never really gotten along with that well. I have been told I might like the Sandman comics, though the same is definitely not true of the TV show. I could tolerate that while the guy was naked in a cage and didn't say anything after that. You're welcome to disagree. Maybe you love Neil Gaiman, maybe you feel personally attacked that I don't. Don't worry! I'm just a guy on the internet and this video isn't important. However, let's not beat around the bush. Nobody actually cares about the other characters and subplots. What we care about is Crowley and Aziraphale, the series' unarguable main selling point and cause of cultural longevity. Heavily coded as romantic, the interactions between angel and demon are written with warmth and humour, carrying most of the emotional investment of the book. It might have been the first queer-coded relationship I interpreted as such, which definitely did something for me, and probably for a whole bunch of baby queers. All this was not just enough to rescue the book as a story, but to grant it an online legacy from fanfiction and fan art galore in the 2000s to an official TV adaptation in 2019. And it's easy to see why. The queer relationship between angel and demon against a backdrop of biblical tyranny is delightfully blasphemous and very culturally sticky. The first season of the TV show follows the events of the book pretty much start to finish. I will admit, I skipped parts of it. David Tennant and Michael Sheen are just as much of a joy as Crowley and Aziraphale as the characters are in the book, and the rest of it is every bit as tedious. In some cases more so, because some humour and plot beats that work in a novel, especially when you have a writer like Terry Pratchett who relies on the medium itself to convey the comedy, don't always work on screen. So I was curious as to where they'd take the story in the second season, but not enough to watch it. That is until a random Mastodon post informed me that they'd canonise the gay, and then, well, they got me. Consider me got. I watched this show over a couple of days as light background fluff while doing an insane amount of unrelated work. It was good for this purpose until the last episode, where I got so mad and lost so much sleep thinking about it that I ended up with a video essay. So, good job not working there. Welcome to losing sleep over Good Omens 2. The second season of Good Omens opens with the sudden appearance of the Archangel Gabriel, head of heaven, in Aziraphale's bookshop, carrying a box, stark naked, with no memory of who he is or why he is there. The only thing he seems to know for sure is that he had to escape because something terrible was about to happen.
Please, tell me about this something terrible.
What? I don't know.
Assuming that Gabriel is being hunted by heaven, Aziraphale asks for Crowley's assistance in sheltering him, which is angrily denied and then angrily provided.
Bundle him into Bentley, I'll drive to Dartmoor, dump him.
Why Dartmoor?
The plot follows the pair as they shield Gabriel from authorities and try to work out what happened to him, interspersed with minisodes that jump into the past with their own start-to-finish narrative, providing more context for current events and for Crowley and Aziraphale's relationship. The narrative is also obviously leading up to a clear canonization of the romance between the leads. This is facilitated partly with a ridiculous lesbian subplot where Crowley and Aziraphale tell Heaven that a recent miracle they performed in order to hide Gabriel was in fact to make some local shopkeeper fall in love. Trapped in the lie, they then attempt to actually hook up said shopkeepers. Unfortunately, it's hard to get invested in the lesbians because the second series suffers from the same issues as the first. Even without divine interference, this relationship is so wooden, it doesn't even seem appropriate to use that word to describe it. Nina and Maggie barely seem to know each other and have zero chemistry. I was also a little wary at first because I thought the show might tick the gay box by having two-dimensional woman tongue on camera while three-dimensional men pine after each other from a distance. Media Buzzkill did an excellent video on the ways that gay male versus female relationships tend to be treated on screen. It's focused on Gotham, but very broadly applicable, would strongly recommend. As the show went on, it became clear that the point of this subplot was that while contriving sudden downpours and candlelit balls to get the humans to acknowledge their feelings, Crowley and Aziraphale would be swept up into their own constructions, dance under the chandelier, and realise that it is, in fact, they who need to acknowledge their feelings. I fully thought that this was where it was going, and it would have been nice. It would have been cute, it would have been silly, it would have fit the overall tone of the show, but I forgot one important thing, which is gays are not allowed to have fun. First off, just a storytelling quibble. Instead of Crowley and Aziraphale gradually realising that the attempt to hook up the lesbians is a misdirection of the energy they should be directing at each other, the lesbians sit Crowley down and tell him this, more or less in those exact words.
You're the hard-bitten one who can't trust anyone ever again, and Mr. Wherever he is the soft one who still believes in magic and people being basically good and all that.
Why are you telling me all this? I don't understand.
Like everything else about the shopkeeper's relationship, this makes very little sense, because Nina and Maggie barely know Crowley, and are therefore no better place to be advising on his relationship than he is to be interfering with theirs. It's just very limp having the characters tell each other the plot like this, when they had a much more coherent, much more fun, and glaringly obvious way for the characters to have that realization for themselves right there. Show, not tell. Basic stuff. Anyway, after a demonic assault on the bookshop, various bureaucratic arguments, and the reveal of what happened to Gabriel, more on that later, the main narrative of the season is over. Crowley psychs himself up to confess his feelings to Aziraphale, while Aziraphale has an important conversation with the head honcho angel Metatron.
Shall we take a little stroll?
I'm sure nothing is about to go horribly wrong. Of course, just as Crowley's about to finally say the thing, Aziraphale interrupts with the news that he's been offered the recently vacated position of Archangel, and that Crowley has been, I guess, pardoned and invited back to heaven with him.
Come back to heaven and everything like the old times.
Crowley is appalled and incensed. They have a massive blow-up argument.
And you told him just where he could stick it then?
In the middle of all this, Crowley still attempts to make his feelings speech, even though the vibe has been thoroughly harshed and now is no longer the time for it. Nor is it the time for Crowley to kiss Aziraphale, which he does before storming out of the door. The season finishes with Aziraphale ascending to heaven and Crowley driving off in his car. The end. Okay, so first off, the kiss scene is probably among the worst I've ever seen in my life. The actors are acting with all their might, but they can't save the dialogue, which just gets more and more stilted and repetitive until we get to this incredibly forced kiss, shot mostly from behind their heads, with this hammy, overwrought music that jars so horribly with the rest of the show that it made me physically recoil. And I don't think this is just my imagination. The cuts are weird. Please observe Aziraphale's flailing arm. Oh my gosh, I'm being kissed. I'm so surprised. Arm floating in the air. Okay, this is happening. Put hand on back. Oh, I'm so surprised. Arm floating in the air. What just happened? People don't do that. Is this a different cut? What the fuck? Why didn't they put more effort into this? This was the moment the entire series had been leading up to, and they filmed it so weirdly that I was distracted by what is either a continuity error or some very bizarre acting. And for context, I'm not a movie nerd. I'm not someone who notices cameras reflected in mirrors or boom stands in the corner or whatever. For me to pick up on a filming problem, it's gotta be pretty bad. Add to all this the fact that Aziraphale doesn't reciprocate, and the scene is borderline uncomfortable to watch. It's less a kiss and more just David Tennant mashing his face into Michael Sheen's. I hope he doesn't actually kiss people like that, good god. Aziraphale does not look like he's having fun, which makes sense, because even if he is attracted to Crowley, he is currently furious, and therefore unable to return the affection at this point in time.
I forgive you.
So of course this is when they have Crowley kiss him. Now, I know people are going to justify this, like Crowley thinks he's never going to get the opportunity again, or it's a last-ditch attempt to change Aziraphale's mind, blah blah blah. But the point is, it's this context, this angry, desperate, doomed context, that often seems to be required for anything gay to happen on camera. Why do they only get to kiss when everything's going to shit? Why is it only when one of them's going to die or leave forever? Why can't gays be happy and content in the act of being gay for like 5 minutes. Why does there always have to be a tragedy? And I get it if it's like a historical or real world setting where there are societal reasons as to why gay people are closeted or persecuted, and I also get that this kind of drama exists aplenty among straight pairings too. However, given the fantastical setting and the knowledge that queer pairings, few and far between as they are rarely allowed to kiss at all and frequently beset by tragedy when they do, this was pretty disappointing to see. Now, I know this isn't the end of the story. They'll presumably pick up on the relationship in the next season. However, now that the two are once again playing for different teams, my prediction is that they will spend the entirety of the next season in a state of long-distance longing, desperately tortured conflict, and reconcile maybe in the very last scene of the very last episode. I was talking about this to Hazel, and she doesn't even think they're going to be allowed to kiss again. If it's going to be a happy ever after ending, then it will just show them drinking wine together, like the end of the first season, except it'll pan out so that we see that now they live together. The end. I don't know that it's gonna go that way, of course, but this ending did not leave me hopeful and completely ruined the lighthearted, fluffy vibe that I'd been watching it for. However, after giving it more thought, I developed a reluctant respect for the decision, and this came mostly from the nature of the argument that the characters have.
If I'm in charge, I can make a difference.
Crucial to getting anything out of the conflict between Crowley and Aziraphale is understanding that despite the colour coding, angels and demons are not innately opposed. Extrapolating from the backstory of Crowley, and Satan for that matter, demons are not born in opposition to heaven, but thrown out of it for questioning or resisting heaven's dogma. Heaven and hell don't perfectly map onto real-world entities, but can be loosely interpreted as follows. Heaven represents the status quo, the governing bodies of most countries, permitting Armageddon, i.e. burning the planet to the ground, because God, i.e. Big Oil, says so, and because the angels, i.e. politicians, personally profit from the current state of affairs and the power they gain by aligning themselves in high positions under God. Hell, on the other hand, exists solely in opposition to heaven. The demons do not seem to have much of a strong agenda of their own other than a general tendency towards chaos and malice and anything that will piss heaven off. They exist against, rather than for. Beyond posturing and aesthetics, hell also don't seem to have much actual power, gag in the second series being that they're horribly understaffed. Crowley rejects the atrocities of heaven and is rejected by heaven in turn. He is thrown into hell, which he initially tries to serve, but he quickly loses faith in hell's agenda. He does not think it possible for hell to win this war, nor that they could do any better if they were in power. So while on paper allied with hell, although I'm not sure if that's still technically the case following the events of the first season, he might be disgraced. It doesn't make too much difference. Crowley goes his own way, mitigating damage by either side as and when he is able. Aziraphale, on the other hand, while constantly working closely with Crowley to minimize the damage done by heaven, is unhappy with his disgraced position and still believes the side of God to be essentially good. The difference between Crowley and Aziraphale isn't anything to do with either of them being good or bad. It's simply that Crowley is a few steps ahead of Aziraphale when it comes to recognizing and rejecting corruption.
We don't need heaven, we don't need hell, they're toxic.
Since the characters are out of favour with heaven and hell by the start of the second season, they no longer need to keep up the pretense of commitment to their given roles as they did in the first. As a result, the underlying and far more nuanced nature of their conflict becomes apparent. The narrative takes care to emphasise this, giving us a scene with Crowley in angel form, creating the universe, for some reason, which you'd think would be a big enough task for God to not hand off to an underling, and another where Aziraphale frets that he's become a demon by defying heaven, to which Crowley just laughs.
You think you're a demon?
By the end of season 2, Aziraphale remains dedicated and committed to trying to fix the system, whereas Crowley is certain that the system cannot be fixed. This is a fucking cool conflict to see come up in reasonably mainstream media, I'm not gonna lie. And even more cool is that the characters being queer isn't just like a nice bonus, but of intrinsic significance to this particular plot. The Good Omens universe is one of biblical literalism, with Crowley and Aziraphale impeding the will of God in various Christian myths that play out as if they actually happened. And famously, one of the many things that a literal reading of the Bible does not allow for is being gay. That they try to hook up two women would suggest that Crowley and Aziraphale, unsurprisingly enough, don't act on religious homophobia. However, this impartiality appears to extend to the entirety of heaven and hell. When informed that Aziraphale made two women fall in love, the angels don't bat an eyelid, and there are characters who use they pronouns on both sides. It's quite possible that the angels don't express any homophobia because the writers just didn't want to go down this road. But a cooler in-universe explanation is that all the immortal beings in this show are A, genderless, and B, don't actually know what gender is. The angels and demons seem to have been cast with little to no regard as to the gender of the actor. For example, this is the angel Michael. The physical forms and pronouns seem to be of lesser significance than they are to humans. Rather than being deeply tied to the angel or demon's identity, they serve more as incidental representations that can be changed at any time, as demonstrated by Beelzebub, who, recast in this season, shrugs off being visually a completely different person as they're having gotten a new face.
I had the old one for 6,000 years, I just thought it was time for a change.
Which makes perfect sense. After all, what could something as trivial as gender mean to a shape-shifting immortal being, especially those who haven't interacted much with humans? The angels in this scene don't even know how reproduction works, so it's very doubtful that they'd have wrapped their heads around the much more convoluted concept of gender. Having no frame of reference for what gender is, they are therefore unable to recognize gender transgression. To go even deeper on this, Crowley and Aziraphale are shown to have a much better understanding of how humans work than the other angels and demons, having spent much more time on Earth and assimilated into human societies.
First visit to Earth, is it?
For this reason, it's possible that they could have picked up more strongly gendered identities and or internalized harmful notions of how certain genders are supposed to behave. Although I do get the sense that the writers have given substantial thought as to how they're doing gender in this show, it's unlikely that anything as explicit or in-depth as this will come up in the text. And I'll be very surprised if the homosexual appearance of Crowley and Aziraphale's relationship causes any narrative problems, which honestly is nice. Still, the show knows what it is. It can't be a coincidence that they made Aziraphale say, "I forgive you," right after Crowley kisses him. We're likely meant to interpret this as forgiveness for Crowley's refusal to return to heaven, but the timing means he could also be forgiving Crowley for the kiss. Even without much basis for homophobia in text, this is pretty loaded. Crowley refuses to return to heaven and asks Aziraphale to reject that damaging norm with him. He confesses his non-conformity, his otherness, his queerness, and Aziraphale condemns him for it. I've got to hand it to them, this is a really smart moment. It's painful because it looks like what it is. I hate it, and it's very good. It's easy to conclude from all this that Aziraphale is wrong and Crowley is right. I'm willing to bet that most people watching that last scene were willing Aziraphale to change his mind and leave with Crowley and not the other way round. But it's still a bit more complex than that. Let's talk about the differing ways that these characters exist on Earth. Aziraphale lives in the center of a human community and forms friendly, if somewhat clumsy, relationships with his neighbors. He is generally agreeable towards most people he meets. Crowley, on the other hand, has no notable relationships besides Aziraphale. Around humans, he behaves with detached indifference or patronizing benevolence. He will shield humans from serious harm, but forms no connection beyond that. Angels and demons, Crowley treats with irreverence, hostility, and contempt, repeatedly pretending or genuinely not recognizing individuals he's met before. Aziraphale lives in a bookshop and interacts with his neighbors. Crowley lives in a car and waters his pot plants. Aziraphale is a well enough established member of his community to be asked to host a shopkeeper meetup. Crowley's pot plants are scared of him. Aziraphale is interested in food, literature, and classical music. Crowley is only interested in Aziraphale.
You idiot. We could have been us.
And ironically enough, this is a key part of why their relationship falls apart. In fixating on the pair of them as a unit, Crowley resigns himself to that limit, instead of seeing broader possibilities. Polyamory. No, but seriously, Crowley's positioning of Aziraphale as his only friend and the dismissive manner in which he treats everyone else prevents him from forming the social connections required to make more widespread and more impactful change. And just to be healthy, I mean, nobody should have just one friend, that's a terrible idea. Crowley sees the system for what it is and is crushed by the knowledge. He is bitterly resigned to working with the limited power he has, attempting to hide even this intention behind a veil of sarcasm and affected nonchalance. Aziraphale, with his enduring hope and optimism, serves as Crowley's only source of solace in a bleak reality. So when Aziraphale jumps at the opportunity to rejoin heaven, Crowley's last bastion falls and there is fuck all he can do about it. He can't sway Aziraphale without presenting a more attractive alternative. And he, unfortunately, is not attractive enough. Aziraphale's desire to do good outweighs his desire to be with Crowley. Crowley's prioritization of their relationship comes across as selfish, his cynicism as defeatist. Aziraphale leaves to take decisive action as best he believes he can, leaving Crowley, having pinned all his hopes and dreams to a single person, devastated and utterly alone. Now if, say, Crowley was part of some kind of network or community with similar goals and ethics to him and Aziraphale, his suggestion that Aziraphale ditch heaven and run away with him might have more legs. Not to mention that Crowley would have someone to talk to about his relationship problems. Granted, relationships with humans might be so fleeting that it's not worth getting invested. However, there are other disgruntled immortals in the system. In the final episode or two, we learn that Gabriel fled heaven after opposing heaven's plan for a second Armageddon, hiding his identity and memories inside a fly given to him by Beelzebub. We learn that he and Beelzebub formed a relationship and that this newfound purpose and loyalty was Gabriel's reason for opposing another war with hell.
Instead of Armageddon, what about no Armageddon?
Oh, another angel and demon who get fed up with the status quo, reject it, and band together. Just like Crowley and Aziraphale, that's something. What's that gonna lead to? Answer, fucking nothing. Throughout the second season, the amnesiac Gabriel lives by the name of Jim. He develops an attachment to both Aziraphale and Crowley, and becomes willing to put himself in harm's way to protect them, in stark contrast to the indifferent and callous character he'd been before. The moment where Gabriel regains his memory could have been one of serious, important character development, because in addition to remembering before being Jim, he should also remember being Jim and everything that happened while he was. So now, having gained a true understanding of just how much Crowley and Aziraphale risked for him, shouldn't he have some sort of reaction? Say thank you, maybe, or apologise for prior atrocities? Wouldn't he now see Aziraphale in an entirely new light? As a friend, as he has considered him to be right up until this point? Nope! He literally only has eyes for Beelzebub. And Beelzebub, oh, this character is wasted in this show. Look at them, they're so cool, I want to be them. This is the only character who casually out-demons Crowley. This brief scene where they show up in his car is just, oh, gold. We learn that Beelzebub is bored and dissatisfied and seemingly depressed quite early on in the second season. But this doesn't go anywhere apart from the thing with Gabriel, which we learn about at the end, which is a bit disappointing. The sole result of an archdemon's dissatisfaction with life is a romance? Please. No one with this impeccable address sense should live their life passively sitting on a throne until some bumbling conservative falls into their lap. I don't actually hate this pairing at all, it's weirdly cute. They have a lot more chemistry than the shopkeepers, though that's not saying much. It's just a frustratingly limited subplot. This was an opportunity to form connections, work together, shake things up, make some kind of angel-demon alliance, have all the angels and demons hook up. Why not? Instead, these love-struck idiots immediately fuck off into the solar system. Because just like the lesbian shopkeepers, they're two-dimensional cardboard cutout characters that only exist to facilitate a narrative that revolves around Crowley and Aziraphale. And this, in my opinion, is not just a key part of the conflict between those two characters, but the show's greatest issue as a whole. The message that needs to be conveyed is collectivist, but they're doing so with an individualist narrative. Everyone other than Crowley and Aziraphale is a prop, dragged onto the set only to provide tension and facilitate plot points. So it's no wonder that these characters feel colourless and hollow, especially when contrasted with Crowley and Aziraphale, who have been given a great deal more care and effort. When it comes to the show's writing, structure, and branding, Crowley and Aziraphale are at the centre of the Good Omens universe. And that's fair, they're the main characters, they're the show's primary appeal, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But I don't think I've ever found side characters and subplots disinteresting to the point of wanting to skip them in any other media I've enjoyed. Crowley and Aziraphale never form relationships that feel truly meaningful besides their relationship to one another, and so long as this remains the case, there is only so good that both the characters and the show can be. After all that, I had to give the show a little more credit and couldn't be quite as mad about the way they handled the gay, although I still don't love it. I mean, they could have allowed the characters to actually get together before breaking them up. Most obvious option being, let the first kiss be a silly, light-hearted thing during the ball scene, which is already going in that direction. Have Hell's Army interrupt shortly afterwards, instead of at the exact moment that Aziraphale pulls Crowley into the dance with him, which is what they did. This was their choice. And it does suck. I do wonder who exactly this show is for, because I think that the gays are gonna watch it and be like, why gay misery, and the homophobes are gonna watch it and be like, why gay? Not that this show has that much to offer religious homophobes, to be fair, it does portray God as a narcissistic sociopath. I guess, is it for normies? Because I think normies will watch and maybe be like, oh, I didn't realise that these characters had feelings for each other because they're the wrong shape. Normally when it's a romantic relationship, one of them has boobs, that's how you know. But nothing against it, it's good. Look how far we've come. Isn't it great that there's gays on TV? And isn't it sad? I thought it was so sad that they don't get to be together at the end. Wasn't it moving? Oh my god, I cried. While this show adheres to some annoying conventions when it comes to handling queerness, and while some of the depth I've picked up on could just be monkeys on a typewriter, the struggles between the characters indisputably parallel the tensions of navigating real-life social justice. Couched as it is in this fictional conflict between heaven and hell, I also think this might go straight over the heads of people who aren't that politically active and may not have the relevant experience for it to feel painfully familiar. Which makes me think that there's a chance the show might do some of the things I would like to have seen in this season in the third season. For example, I think I read somewhere that Gabriel is going to be a more significant character, meaning hopefully Beelzebub as well, which might be in the way that I've spoken about. It's just weird that if that's where they're going, they didn't establish this at the point when it was most obvious to do so. Because this show has so far performed really poorly when it comes to making compelling side characters, my guess is that even if they do give Crowley a bunch of renegade demon friends and have them kidnap Aziraphale or something, it's going to fall emotionally flat even if it otherwise succeeds as a narrative. As for the main relationship, I would love my predictions from before to be proven wrong. Honestly, that would be great. If the writers of these kinds of shows listened to their queer viewers, we would have much better television. And I don't think that they don't care, because this isn't just a show that is gay. This is a show that is queer. It just remains to be seen if in future it will do any better by the community I do think it is genuinely trying to represent. So, that was my brain activity for several hours in bed after watching Good Omens 2 with the intention to relax. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm complaining, but not really, it's good. I'm trying to get better at just letting myself write whatever when my brain goes into that kind of overdrive state, rather than being like, oh, this isn't important, or you're supposed to be doing something else, or whatever. Write what you want and work with what you've got. Special thanks to my monthly coffee supporters whose names are coming up on screen. If you would like to help me with my dream of one day earning minimum wage, you could help by tossing 1 or 2 of your currency per month at my Coffee page. Other ways you could help are by liking this video, commenting, sharing, and of course subscribing to the channel. Even if you find my videos some other way, if it makes no difference to you, please just do it anyway, because the more the channel grows, the more people see it, the more I have a chance of earning a living this way and continuing to make the videos that I assume you enjoy. Special thanks to Teo for editing this video on top of his own videos, which are also very good. Go watch them at the letter 15. Additional thanks to Hazel for helping me set up, making me cups of tea, and doing my thumbnails. I always forget to mention that she does that. She does that. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Bye!